And next we have Senator Francis Black. You have 5 minutes.
And I would like to welcome the Taoiseach to the Chamber today, and I'm glad to see you back in Shannon. And I know we have a limited amount of time, so I just want to focus on 3 specific points, if that's okay, Taoiseach. Firstly, as you know, the Oireachtas Good Friday Committee recently spent 2 days in Belfast meeting a number of community groups. This outreach is a really vital part of our work on the legacy issues that remain from the conflict, and the visit was really impactful. I was actually blown away from it. I was blown away particularly by the testimonies, particularly on the Irish language. There are over 6,000 children in Irish medium education across Ireland, and for many in Belfast, it's such a central part of their identity across the north of Ireland, part of their identity. This issue is often politicised to the point where it's viewed mainly as a political football or an institutional stumbling block. But this is far removed from the ordinary concerns of the people who speak the language daily and care deeply about its development. But what I was especially struck by was our meetings with the Protestant Unionist and Loyalist communities. I was delighted to speak with these groups, who I feel are often forgotten and marginalised. Their focus was on unemployment, housing, mental health and the legacy of the conflict. And you could see a real passion to regenerate the communities. It was really amazing, and you could feel the passion from them. While the Irish language is often associated with nationalism, and this is what I was really surprised at, the Lower Shankill Community Association actually runs a weekly class teaching it. And one of the first comments from a participant was that language should be neutral and belong to everyone, and that it's often politicised far beyond this. So I saw a real focus on social issues, and in this sense the Irish language wasn't always the biggest priority. That was a huge shock to me as well. Many were happy to see such classes being offered and were more concerned with the availability of housing and social and economic opportunities for their children. So it really made me see that the political focus, particularly on language, does not always reflect the reality on the ground. That was an eye-opener. What we hear in media coverage down here doesn't correspond with our meetings in East and West Belfast last month. And I don't want these marginalised voices to be unheard, and I would ask you, Taoiseach, if you'd be willing to meet with such groups and to provide greater chance for direct engagement. And I think they'd really love to meet you as well. I previously noted my admiration for the fantastic work you're doing on this issue, and I know the current situation in the north is something you care deeply about, especially in the context of Brexit. This sort of community engagement can only enhance that. But secondly, I want to touch briefly on the situation in Palestine, and I know we've kind of spoken a lot about this. I welcome the robust debate we had on the Occupied Territories Bill, which I tabled in January, and I'm glad you've committed to facilitating government time to resume that debate before the summer recess. A lot of the focus was on our legal capacity to pursue such a policy on settlement goods, and I'm very happy to work with the Oireachtas members to outline the strong, coherent legal basis of the legislation. I'll be reaching out to the Foreign Affairs Committee in particular, as many members have a deep interest in the issue and the bill itself, given that the committee strongly endorsed a ban on settlement goods in 2012. And during the debate, you noted that your preference was for coordinated EU action on settlement expansion, which, of course, I would strongly welcome. But you also told the Dáil that there was just no reasonable prospect of that happening. So I've spoken with you on this previously, and I think it's at this point where we differ. When the question becomes how Ireland should react to EU gridlock, I appreciate and recognise your position on this, but I do believe we can show leadership. It is in the spirit that I table this bill. We can and should be willing to act first if others won't in the face of justice. On the EU point, Senator Daly noted in January's debate that you had made a commitment to raise the issue of settlement expansion at the EU Foreign Affairs Council last week, and I'd welcome an update at that point. Was the issue raised, and what was the response of the foreign ministers? And thirdly, very briefly, the Joint Committee on Foreign Affairs produced an extensive review of the Irish aid programme last month, and the clear call for the enhanced oversight measures in multilateral programmes stood out. I'm so proud of Ireland's aid work, but we have to ensure that agreements we're signing up to respect human rights and the humanitarian principles of this country. I think in particular of the EU-Turkey deal on migration and the atrocious treatment of refugees fleeing persecution. We need coherence between our aid programme and our foreign policy on issues like this. Given the committee's report, would the Taoiseach agree for increased enhanced oversight in the multilateral system that it called for? And lastly, I would just reiterate the questions by my colleague here, Senator Grace O'Sullivan, as to joint procurement under PESCO. How can we be sure that nations with whom we jointly develop or buy military equipment will not use that equipment outside UN mandate? For example, Germany has troops in Afghanistan. So thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing your response.